However, they not only plant the positive germs of later higher development, but are in themselves manifestations of the spirit in its organizing control of the material of fluctuating impulses, activities of specifically human expediency that creates for itself, no matter how brutal, extraneous, or even stupid, the norms of life instead of merely receiving them from natural forces. Nowadays there are extreme individualists who are nonetheless in practice adherents of socialism because they consider socialism to be the indispensable preparation and even the severe training for a purified and just individualism. Thus the relatively stable order and external standardization of marriage by purchase was a first, very violent and eminently non-individual, attempt to give a certain mold to the marriage relationship which was just as appropriate for primitive stages as the more individualistic marital form is for more highly developed stages. The importance of marriage for social cohesion is already indicated by the exchange of women, which, as a barter agreement, might be considered a preparatory stage to the purchase of women. Among the Australian Narranyeri, marriage is conducted by the exchange of the sisters of two men. If, instead of this arrangement, one of the girls elopes with a lover, then not only is she considered to be socially inferior, but she also loses the claim for protection which the clan into which she was born otherwise owes her. This clearly illustrates the social significance of this non-individual type of marriage. The clan no longer protects the girl, it severs its relationship with her because it has not received an equivalent for her. Marriage by purchase and the value of women. The transition to the second culturally advanced motive for marriage by purchase commences here. The fact that women are useful objects of possession, that their acquisition requires sacrifices, ultimately makes them appear to be valuable. It has been stated that possession universally engenders love of possessing. One not only makes sacrifices for what one loves, but also one loves that for which one has made sacrifices. If motherly love is the source of innumerable sacrifices for the children, then so too the trouble and worries that the mother endures for the child form an ever closer bond with the child. This explains why sick or handicapped children, who require the greatest devotion on the part of the mother, are often the most beloved ones. The Church has never hesitated to demand the greatest sacrifices for the love of God, since it was well aware that we become all the more closely tied to a principle the more sacrifices we have made, the more capital, so to speak, we have invested in it. However much the purchase of women directly expressed their suppression, exploitation and valuation solely as an object, the woman nevertheless gained value both for the parents, who received the purchase price, as well as for the husband, to whom she represented a relatively high sacrifice and who therefore had to treat her considerately in his own interest. Compared with modern standards, her treatment was still miserable enough, and certainly the better aspects of the purchase of women could become so paralyzed by the humiliating aspects that women found themselves in the most wretched and slave-like position. But it remains equally true that the purchase of women has given meaningful and eloquent expression to the fact that women are valuable and, in the psychological context, not only to the fact that they are purchased because they are valuable, but that they are valuable because one has to pay for them. Therefore it is understandable that among certain American tribes the giving away of a girl without payment is considered a great deprecation of the girl and her whole family, so much so that their children would be considered to be nothing better than bastards. Although the purchase of women always implies a tendency towards polygamy and thereby the degradation of women, the necessity of spending money, on the other hand, sets a limit to such trends. The pagan Danish kind Frotho is reported to have legally prohibited the vanquished Ruthenians from contracting any marriages except by the purchase of women. His intention was to suppress lax morals since he saw the purchase of women as a guarantee of stability. Indirectly, by necessarily restricting the polygamous instincts with which it has affinities, the purchase of women must lead to a higher appreciation of the woman owned. Not only is the stability a consequence of appreciation of the wife, but conversely, her valuation is a consequence of the established stability, just as it is the consequence of direct expenses. It is of the utmost importance that the differences in prices in the socially controlled as well as the free market prices reflects the difference in value of the women. It is said that the Kaffir women do not consider being sold to be in the least way humiliating. On the contrary, the girl is proud of it, and the more bulls and cows are paid for her the more valuable she considers herself to be. One may frequently notice that a certain category of objects acquires a stronger awareness of value if each single one has to be appraised individually and if considerable differences in prices develop an increasing sense of value. At other levels of evaluation, however, as in the case of Wergild, the identical nature of the compensation favors the objective significance of the equivalent value. The purchase of women is one of the first, though very crude, methods of emphasizing the individual value of a particular woman and also, according to the psychological rule of valuation, the value of women in general. Even when the woman is sold as a slave, the variation in prices is probably much greater than it is for male slaves. The male slave, as a mere working animal, has at the same age about the same conventional price, in ancient Greece and in Ireland equal to 3 cows, whereas the female slave, who serves purposes other than work, changes in value according to her personal attractiveness, although the impact of this aesthetic factor is not very great among primitive people. In any case, at the lowest stage of development the price is usually fixed by custom, as in the purchase of women among several African tribes. All these instances strongly underline the fact that a woman is treated as a mere genus, an impersonal object. This is itself, bearing in mind all the qualifications mentioned earlier, the distinguishing feature of marriage by purchase. Therefore, among some people, particularly in India, the purchase of women is considered dishonorable, while in other areas it may take place, but the term is avoided and the price paid to the parents is interpreted as a voluntary present. The difference between money proper and other contributions is relevant here. The Laplanders are said to give their daughters away in return for presents, but they consider it improper to take money for them. If one takes account of the other very complicated conditions that determine the position of women, it seems as if purchase for money degrades them more than being given away in return for presents or in return for personal services to their parents on the part of the suitors. The gift contains something more personal, because of the indeterminateness of the gift's value and the individual freedom of choosing, even if governed by conventions, than a definite sum of money with its uncompromising objectivity. In addition, the gift builds the bridge to that later form which is the transition to the dowry, where the gifts of the suitor are matched by the gifts of the bride's parents. The unconditional disposal of the woman is thereby broken, because the value that the man has accepted implies a certain obligation and he is now no longer merely the creditor since the other side also has a claim. It has also been asserted that the acquisition of women by labor tasks instead of by direct purchase represents a higher marital form. Nevertheless, it seems that this is the older and uncivilized form which does not rule out the possibility that it is associated with better treatment of women. For the emergent money economy has often worsened the condition of women, just as it has worsened the situation of weaker groups as a whole. Among present-day primitive peoples we sometimes find both forms existing side by side. This proves that there is no essential difference in the treatment of women here, although, by and large, the sacrifice of such a personal value as service elevates the acquisition of a woman over that of a slave in a very different manner than purchasing her for money or substantial money value. It must be emphasized here that what is generally true is that the degradation and humiliation of human value decreases if the purchase prices are very high. For money value in very great sums contains an element of rarity which makes it more individual and less interchangeable and thus more appropriate as an equivalent of personal values. Among the Greeks in the heroic period, a bridegroom's gifts to the bride's father, which do not appear to suggest direct purchasing, were quite common, while the position of women was particularly favorable. But it must be emphasized that these gifts were quite considerable. Although it appears degrading if the essence or the whole of a person is made equivalent to a sum of money, an unusually large sum offered